pull up Ecclesiastes 3? Chris, can you get him to pull up Ecclesiastes? You know, when Chris got back from Amarillo, and I kind of asked him how the trip went because I didn't get to go, and uh, he said everything went pretty good. So I'm like, there's nobody I should be mad at or anything. And he was like, maybe me. 3. And I was like, well, what'd you do? You ain't hurt any of the kids, did you? And so he was like, nah, but I may be going back down there to Amarillo. I might be leaving you guys. And he told me, pretty much what he told you guys earlier about kind of what's going on and how the conversation came up and how kind of guys led him, to go down there and work with the youth there. And it was just probably a week or two before where we had another conversation about some other things where it's, as much of a blessing he's been, and many of you don't even know half the things that we've done and he's done to kind of help this ministry along in the past few months. You guys see what goes on Saturdays. You get to eat the food, you get to come and participate, and you might even look at the videos on the website or see some of the stuff, but most of you have no idea the time and the hours that goes into making these 4 hours happen every week. And a lot of it wouldn't even be possible if he wasn't around helping out over this past year or so. And so you kind of get to a point where, in my position, where you have so much to do and it's so overwhelming that you start thinking that, you need people like that around. And like I said, it was a few weeks before he made that call where I kind of realized, it's like, you know what, we've got enough done. We've got enough accomplished that I really didn't need him as much as I thought. And so it wasn't upset that he was leaving. It was, you understood that God has something different. Change. And it was okay, because when God brings change upon your life, you got to accept it. In Ecclesiastes 3:14, Ecclesiastes 3, go to chapter 3. This was, I believe, the scripture I used in the first message I've ever preached here in the Youth Center almost 2 years ago. You sure? Chapter 3. 1. Yeah, I believe this was the scripture I used when we first time I preached here for you guys. And you've pretty much heard this before, I hope. Is where it goes, there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. We can read it from that verse, that version. There's an opportune time to do things, a right time for everything on the earth. Go to the next one. A right time for birth, another for death, a right time to plant, and another to reap. I'm not going to read this whole thing just for time's sake, but it goes on through all the different things there's a time for. And, in the new year, everybody talks about new beginnings, new resolutions, new semesters at school. All you hear about now, they're talking about a new president. For Chris, we're talking about going to get a new opportunity, a new job. It's a time for everything. It's a different season. One thing that you can bet on is going to happen in your life, especially as young people, change. You're going to go through a lot of change. And the thing is, You can't be afraid of it. You can't be upset about it. Because change, as sometimes scary it can be just as fulfilling, especially when you seek God through that change. When your change is within his will. And I was listening to a pastor talk on TV the other day, and his message kind of really hit on what, God was dealing with me about or talking to me about. And he said something. He said a crutch. He talked about crutches. And you get a crutch, you use a crutch when, say, you break a leg. So you're using that crutch, right, to get around, or crutches to get around with. But what happens when your leg gets better? Do you still use those crutches? You put them away. They've served their purpose already. And this pastor was talking about how many people begin to rely on crutches in their life. And sometimes those crutches are people, sometimes those crutches are things. Some people rely on their cell phones for everything. It can become a crutch. Sometimes, but that he was really more focused on was people. Sometimes people use other people in their lives as a crutch. God brings people into your life. I can tell you, since I've been here for the last 2 years almost, when there's a problem, there's a need that I'm thinking, oh man, how do we do this? God has always sent somebody. It started out when I first got here, we didn't have good worship. It was rough. And then a few months later, the worship team started to develop. Some of the people are still here, some aren't. People come and go. That's part of the seasons. That's part of the change that God brings. That doesn't mean they're bad people. That doesn't mean that the people are here are still good. You have to accept what God is bringing into your life and what God is taking out of your life. There was times when we needed help doing physical labor, building stuff around here. That was a time when Ethan was here 2 or 3 times a week doing things that you guys never have any idea what he did. That was his season. That was his time to help build things. Then he had to move on. We had a time when we wanted to do more activities, and I just didn't have the time and the day to do it. Chris comes along. Driving the vans around, going to different events, planning things. Season. Now he's moving on. There's a time and there's a season for everything. You can't rely on someone or something so much that they become a crutch to your life that you can't let go, that you can't understand that sometimes they got to move on. In Job 1, when he talks about all the things that Job went through, remember he said, the Lord gave and the Lord taketh away, and still blessed be the name of the Lord. In your life, the Lord's going to give you a lot of things, and the Lord's going to take it away. What you don't want to do is try to grab too closely onto some of those things that he's trying to move out your life. Why? Because when he moves them out your life, that means something better is going to move in. When you make room in your life, when you kill yourself like Casey was talking about, you just don't stay dead. God brings new life into you. But he can't bring that in if you're holding on to those things of the past, those people that may have come and helped you get through a certain situation. There's no room for him to come and bring in new life to you. For many of you, this is a season in your life. The harsh reality of it is you're not going to be in this youth group forever. Some of you may not be here in 4 or 5 months. Some of you may be here for the next 4 or 5 years.